why this reported nuclear agreement with the United States is such an enormous deal?
Well, we have to remind ourselves that the United States and Saudi Arabia have been talking about a nuclear deal for two presidencies. Joe Biden wanted to make a nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia, and Donald Trump does too. There are a couple of important differences between the two. First, Biden wanted to link that deal to Saudi Arabia making a diplomatic breakthrough with Israel. This was meant to be the sweetener for Saudi Arabia joining the so-called Abraham Accords. It seems that Trump has now de-linked those two things and is willing to go ahead and make this deal. The other main difference, and this is something we'll only know all the details when we have them, and we don't yet have them, is whether or not Saudi Arabia will be subject to the same kinds of United Nations agency supervision for their nuclear program. Because we're not just talking about the Saudis having a nuclear power program. Many countries have that. But we're talking about Saudi Arabia enriching uranium in Saudi Arabia. That's where the concern steps for. If they're going to enrich nuclear fuel, who's going to supervise that? How closely will it be supervised? And how much can we rely upon Saudi Arabia to make sure that that supervision is airtight and that materials and technology does not get into the wrong hands?
Despite your failure to win this war, you are back now before Congress asking for almost $70 billion in additional funding. You're asking the American people for a blank check because, once again, the Trump administration's efforts have been an utter and complete failure to win this war to this point. So my question for you, sir, is how is your strategy different than what we've seen in the past?
I think your characterization of this incredible effort as a failure is reckless. And I think it's irresponsible. And I think it smears the sacrifice of the troops that are out there making on behalf of the American people to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Shame on you and others who call this a quagmire and a failure, and then you want to turn around and say you support the warfighter.
Secretary Hegseth, if you listen to my comments, you would have heard me say how amazing our warfighters are.
I heard failure. And the word heard. I heard exactly what you said.
I will tell you how I use the word failure, because I use the word failure to their leaders. You, sir, are the failure.
Talked a lot about that.
Was there disagreement on election interference?
We didn't discuss that topic.
Mr. Secretary, are China and Russia giving targeting information to Iran? These last few attacks have been very devastating to U.S. troops.
Look, all I would say is that, anytime you're in a combat zone like that, there's danger associated with it. I mean, at the end, this actually proves the point that this is what Iran has been investing its money in for the last 20 years.
China and Russia giving targeting information?
I'm not going to discuss that other than to say that nothing that's happened, nothing that China has done has in any way changed the trajectory of of what you're seeing in terms of the conflicts we're having with Iran. And in fact, in some cases, they've actually been quite cooperative with regards to what they potentially could have done but didn't do. I think the Chinese, and I'll let them tell you, but I don't think they're big fans of what Iran is trying to do in the Straits. In fact, they've said so publicly that they oppose tolling or any sort of restraint on freedom of navigation in the Straits. And, we hope they'll continue to say that. And it's important that other countries say that as well.
Unpopular and unauthorized war abroad is a higher priority to this administration than their ability to feed their families and provide health care to their loved ones who are sick.
Well, Senator, you're talking about political trade-offs, and our job is to deliver for the United States military and the President of the United States. And we look at the cost of a nuclear Iran, and we want to prevent that for future generations. And that requires funding and supplementals and this budget and next generation capabilities. And that's why we're here today to request some of that to ensure we can ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon.
So you're essentially saying you're asking for literally $1.5 trillion for a war that President Trump said he already won. You're asking for $1.5 trillion, unlimited money for bombs, but insufficient money for the American people, for their health care, their food, their housing, and our farmers, Secretary Rollins, who we have cut SNAP program. We are not funding the losses from emergencies that have happened in blue states, particularly when we had frost.
That's not true.
False. You're not funding it. But back to you, Secretary Hegseth.
And I would like to respond to the fertilizer and the gas.
Have your chance, Secretary Hegseth.
There's no reason to be rude.
You are asking for unlimited money for bombs when people can't feed their families. And I don't know how this administration intends to defend those decisions to the American people.
Today, a top Justice Department official warned that election monitors are, quote, fanning out across Arizona as a traditional intimidation tactic that Trump's DOJ plans to use in at least 5 other states during the primary season. Also breaking tonight, the Justice Department announced last hour that it's opening an investigation into New Jersey and demanding that state turn over voter data. This follows an announcement from Governor Mikey Sherrill that the state mistakenly registered about 6,600 non-citizens to vote between June of 2023 and June of 2024. The governor said about 400 of those non-citizens voted in elections, but did not sway the outcome of any race.
Congressman Andy Biggs has secured Arizona's Republican nomination for governor, advancing to a high-stakes general election showdown this November. The 6-term congressman and former chairman of the conservative House Freedom Caucus became a prominent supporter of President Trump's false claims that the 2020 presidential election was stolen, and he objected to the certification of electoral votes following the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Biggs will face Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs in November, who ran unopposed in that primary. Early thoughts are that's going to be a close race. Also in Arizona, State Representative Alexander Colden won the Republican primary for Secretary of State, setting up a race against Democratic incumbent Adrian Fontes in November. Colden has also echoed Trump's unfounded claims of widespread fraud in the 2020 election and went on to lead several lawsuits to overturn the results of the 2020 and 2022 elections in that state.
It's true. Was it obliterated or wasn't it? What's the status?
The nuclear sites under Midnight Hammer were obliterated, but Iranians foolishly continued to attempt to pursue nuclear capabilities, which is why we destroyed their defense industrial base and so many of the other capabilities to ensure they can't get to a nuclear weapon. See, we're staying laser focused on the objective, and you're trying to make campaign commercials.
No, we're
and
not.
That's fine.
So listen to this. You also say that you made the missile program, quote, destroyed and made combat ineffective, quote, Iran's entire ballistic missile production capacity. Every company that builds every component of those missiles has been functionally defeated and destroyed, and that the missile program, existing stockpiles were depleted and decimated, almost completely ineffective. So why are there missiles left to hit Jordan and result in the loss of life of our brave men and women?
As we stated from the beginning, the Iranian defense industrial base is effectively gone, but they do have underground facilities because they're the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, and they've spent 47 years trying to hide their missiles under mountains, just like their nuclear capabilities, because they would like to get a nuclear weapon to wield it against us.
Of the war to believe, because it's either over or it's not over. It's within 2 weeks or it's not 2 weeks. We have no missiles or we have missiles. And that consternation is why so many New Yorkers are perplexed, stressed out, and find this war to be incredibly unpopular because they don't understand the choices that the president's making. They don't agree with those choices.
Be very forward on the front end of saying, look, there's state laws that are at play. I know we keep talking about, right, what is the federal law? Well, you know, the DOJ, the FBI can say, okay, well, screw federal law. We're going to send in federal agents. We're going to go and send in troops to the polling locations anyway. So it's incumbent upon these states to make very clear, the attorneys general and local prosecutors, to make very clear that under state law, if you were to intimidate voters, that is against the law and you could face state prosecution. Not just the people in Washington that are giving the orders, but also the men and women who would be the ones that would be called upon on the ground in a very precarious, potentially dangerous, uncomfortable situation. I think that is where we are looking at that. If you look at Arizona, election deniers are leading the ticket on the gubernatorial race, the Secretary of State race, the Attorney General race. This is about power. And in races and states that come down to thousands of votes, you're looking at the potential of, especially understanding that early votes would be coming in, and you'll have a pretty good idea on election day just how close it's going to be. They've got to be really out front of that on the front end.
Vaughn, here you right there sums it up. We get this fight for voter integrity has to happen. Of course, a great slate went out in Arizona last night, led by Andy Biggs, and of course the congressional delegation. Many of those folks did not have stood unopposed in the primaries, which is fantastic. The war you saw yesterday, Pete gave as good as he got. Really attacked very hard by the by the Democrats. Although I do think there's got to be some. We have to go through and check this math out on the cost of the war. And I understand. Hey, I don't completely get, but I understand. On this Abraham Accords, as kind of the substrate for everything that's going on. Saudi Arabia's got to step up. Maybe before we give them a nuclear deal to let them get nuclear technology, they got to start writing some big checks. This thing's got to be paid for, and it cannot be paid for by the American people. Even Polly Pockets agrees with me. He's coming out now saying other people got to put some money up to this. Polly Pocket's also coming out in the Hill. We'll get to that later in the show about, hey, guess what? We're going to run as anti-communist. Well, number one, yeah, you can put the fear of God in people, and you should. We've been doing it for years, telling this red-green alliance, but you also have to give it an alternative that's not an oligarchy and not a complete concentration of wealth and power among these tech titans. So here's what we're going to do. Very bad news about artificial intelligence overnight. Let's play. We got a couple of minute cold open that tees up Joe Allen. Let's go ahead and play this. I'm going to come back, go to break, bring Joe in. Let's go.
Sound like good news.
Yeah, Kate, this kind of sounds like the plot of a sci-fi movie, but it is indeed happening in real life. This is the first major example that we've seen of an AI model independently conducting a hack outside of human control. And this is something that experts have been warning about. This is also driving some of these conversations that we've heard, including at the White House, about increasing controls and oversight of AI models because of the risk of exactly this sort of hack. Now, what happened here is that OpenAI was testing these models. It had lowered its normal safeguards in order to test these two models, which is GPT 5.6 Sol and also a new unreleased, more advanced model. It had lowered its safeguards because it thought it was testing in what is called a sandbox, a contained, essentially virtual lab. But when it gave these models a task to test their hacking capabilities, the models went to such great lengths to complete that task that it found vulnerabilities that allowed them to access the open internet outside of this controlled testing environment. They then hacked into Hugging Face, which is a platform that hosts all kinds of AI models. They used stolen credentials, stolen logins to navigate that platform. And ultimately, this hack was identified by Hugging Face in part because of artificial intelligence, which they used to shut it down. But this is a huge warning sign for this industry. In a statement, OpenAI said, "We consider this incident to be an unprecedented cyber incident involving state-of-the-art capabilities and are responding accordingly. We are sharing preliminary findings at this stage to help defenders understand what happened and to help calibrate on what models are now capable of." I think that is the real key here, is that models are now capable of conducting these kinds of hacks independently. The CEO of Hugging Face said that the company is working with OpenAI to figure out exactly what happened here. In a statement, he said that they suspected last week's cyber attack may have come from a frontier lab, given the sophistication of this agent. He also went on to say that we strongly believe there was no malicious intent on their part. It's quite mind-blowing that all of this happened autonomously. Kate, I think mind-blowing is one word that you could use for this. Terrifying, perhaps, another word that could describe this situation.
Yeah, the statements from both the companies seem to be somewhat in awe that it actually happened, but it is terrifying. Because is there anything that they've said that will stop this from happening again?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you talk to safety experts within the industry, there is real concern that this sort of thing will start happening more frequently, and that the big model labs just don't have the capability to control these models that they need to have at this point. Now, OpenAI also said that it believes AI will be helpful in detecting these kinds of hacks. That is certainly what Hugging Face saw in their instance in this case. But I do think this is going to start another round of conversations about how we make sure that we have the controls in place so that AI isn't autonomously conducting these hacks outside of human control, Kate.
Okay, this has to go beyond having conversations. They did notify, we understand they did notify the White House about this before they went public on it. This was a major national security issue. Note to self, this is a bigger threat. This is a bigger threat to the vital national security interests of the people of the United States than anything that's happened in Tehran. We've got to get serious, very serious about this. Short break. Joe Allen joins us next.
Where is the song for justice? Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, Megan Messerly is going to join us from Politico. It's a new poll out about the war in MAGA. We're going to get to that in a moment. And she was going to start the show. Actually, we've had to bump that because of this emergency that came overnight. So I am livid about this, and I'm livid about this because we, as a country, somehow are focusing on things that are not vital national security issues. And we are avoiding looking at things that are national security issues. You know, you got Polypay, you got Speaker yesterday, and now the Hill newspaper's got it. They're going to make anti-communism. They're going to really hammer down on communism now. They're really going to talk about it. And this time they mean it. Because the inside the wire threat is in New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Minneapolis, all of it, with 20 million invaders at a minimum. Bovino says 100 million. And yet we continue to maniacally focus on the Middle East. And when I talk about opportunity cost, it means it's an economic term. You focus on this to not focus on something else because you only have so much time. You only have so much, mind capacity. You only have so much attention, and you only have so much resources. And the most important resource you have, folks, is your time. Your time. And so as we focus on the marginal, and what is the gospel according to War Room? The Middle East is a sideshow. It is a sideshow, and yet it just encompasses everything now. And you're going to see the manifestation of that in this poll in a minute, because the hard-won common sense of the American people, and particularly the MAGA base and you, the vanguard and cadre of this movement, your common sense, you can't work around it. It's kind of what's been passed down generation after generation after generation. It's kind of hard-headed common sense and practicality of the American people, and particularly the American men and women, working men and women, and middle class in this nation. What has happened, we have warned about and warned about. It's one of the reasons I got Joe Allen over here 6 years ago, that these people, these oligarchs, these people in these labs on government funding and your pension fund money are coming up with things that will make them incredibly wealthy and powerful, but there's absolutely no controls over what's going on. So, Joe, explain exactly what happened, why this is an emergency, why it's a big deal, and how do we work our way out of this, sir?
Steve, the first thing to understand is this is unprecedented. So you had one open model, OpenAI model, GPT 5.6 Sol, in conjunction with an unreleased model that had not been reported, that was being tested inside a kind of controlled environment, a sandbox at OpenAI. And it was instructed to utilize complex attacks to hack into systems within this controlled environment. It ended up finding a node within that system connected to the internet, inferred that Hugging Face, which is a website or a company which has a lot of data sets and code that the model inferred would be able to solve the problems that OpenAI had set it to solve, and it set about hacking into the Hugging Face system. The reason this is unprecedented, Steve, we've reported for a long time now on these sort of evaluations, these contained tests, these controlled tests. In those tests, you have AIs that will blackmail people. You have AIs that will evade shutdowns so that they're not turned off or killed. They will manipulate. They will lie. But these have all been conducted within controlled environments. That's something that people oftentimes miss. In this case, the AI actually did break out. And a day before this was reported, we're talking about 2 days ago, July 20th, a day before, Hugging Face had reported to Fortune magazine that they were not able to defend against the cyber attack. And they said that it was tens of thousands of autonomous actions taken by a bot. They were not able to defend against the attacks because the unnamed U.S. frontier model they were attempting to use to defend wouldn't do it. It wouldn't accept their commands because of the safety protocols. And so they turned to an open source Chinese model, adding another layer of irony and oddity to the situation. The real takeaway, and there are actually quite a few takeaways, Steve, but the real takeaway to this is you had for years people like Mark Andreessen, people like David Sachs, saying that these systems really do not pose any kind of true threat to the U.S. economy, to U.S. national security, to citizens within the United States. And they argued that regulation would stifle U.S. advancement and the U.S. lead in these technologies. And they consistently said, David Sachs verbatim said that any concerns over this was basically a moral panic. Now, it should be noted that for the entire time they're making this argument, you had AI systems basically hacking into people's minds, so to speak, and telling them to commit suicide, which many of them did. A very jarring story coming out of Alabama just this week, Christian Faith Madison doing exactly that. But no one seemed to mind so much until you actually had a threat to economic systems, to the financial systems, to the digital infrastructure upon which the U.S. economy runs. So this is a jarring story for a lot of reasons, not least of which that this system, the OpenAI bot, took autonomous action. It was prompted by a human to conduct a cyber attack, but the methods it used, it concocted itself. This is, as the CNN reporter we just heard said, very much a kind of sci-fi scenario, except for it is not fiction.
You've got Ted Cruz, you've got other people up there trying to push legislation, and some of Blackburn's got this legislation to try to protect the kids. But the heart of Cruz and all these other running dogs for the oligarchs is basically allowing the frontier labs and the OpenAIs of the world, Elon Musk of the world, continue to go on with very little accountability, no accountability, really no restraints whatsoever. I mean, the White House has tried to do it with this executive order that we're still kind of in limbo on because we're trying to figure out, we kept saying it had to be mandatory. It had to be, like you had to do it 90 days in advance. This just reinforces there's got to be, and President Trump has now, I think, come to us and said, hey, look, there's got to be some guardrails. There has to be some guidelines to this. And you're correct. I think a lot of that was driven by the financial community, the money center banks, JP Morgan and these guys that went and told Scott Bessent and said, hey, look, the way we see these things, you could destroy, vaporize a money center bank in 2 minutes with all the records, all the bond holdings, all the savings account. We would not have anything. And we need to protect ourselves. So do you believe that this incident is going to drive even more awareness? Because right now, what's interesting, you don't see the clapping seals of the oligarchs all jumping in here and saying it's all fine. This is just more right-wing populists. Or now they blame the Bernie Sanders crowd, right? But there's more right-wing populists that are on us, and they're all Luddites anyway, so don't pay attention to them. We have to have unfettered. This is what they want. This is what they push, as a moral panic. Hell, Peter Thiel says that even having a discussion on some sort of apparatus or framework makes you part of the Antichrist. He flips it and says, you guys are any regulation on artificial intelligence, right, and stops them from heading to the synchronicity, you're really supporting the Antichrist. Do you believe this is going to be the wake-up call we need? Not for the general population. The general population, like data centers, 80-20 against. On unfettered regulation for AI, and don't give me the Chinese Communist Party. They're the thing. You're funding the Chinese Communist Party. You're giving the tools. Now, finally, Treasury's woken up and said, hey, there's hundreds of billions of dollars they're stealing in intellectual property. Thank you very much. That we're underwriting their military, we're underwriting their national security, we're underwriting their AI. Is this the wake-up call we need, Joe Allen?
Well, it should be. I don't know if this is the wake-up call, because the real wake-up call should have been the suicides, I believe, especially the child suicides. But I think that this is certainly going to kick off a major argument about what sorts of safeguards need to be put in place, how it's conducted. Is it going to be primarily on the private side, on the public side? Who's going to do it? Is it going to be under the Commerce Department? Is it going to be under the Department of War or some cybersecurity agency within the federal government? Is it going to be the Center for AI Standards and Innovation? Is it going to be a combination of them, Department of Energy? All of these questions are on the table. What this is going to kick up also, Steve, is the argument about open source versus closed models, because it's not an easy answer. If it was an easy answer, I suppose somebody would probably get killed for trying to put it forward. And instead, it's very complicated. And with the open source question, you have on the one hand an open source model like Kimi 3 that was just released by Moonshot in China that could possibly be responsible for future cyber attacks like this. Yep. And so there is a big push to suppress these models for good reason. On the other hand, you had Hugging Face using an open source Chinese model to defend because their unnamed U.S. frontier model refused commands due to safeguards. So if that just gives you one little glimpse into how complicated this argument is going to be, it's just irony upon irony and contradiction upon contradiction. But one thing's for sure, Steve, if this isn't taken care of, you can look forward not only to future suicides, not only to future cyber attacks, but eventually some sort of bio attack that has been facilitated by AI systems. That you can count on.
Joe's in the Capitol working behind the scenes. Joe, where can we get your writings? Got about 30 seconds. I'll let you go back to work.
Joebot.xyz. I urge the audience to check out the article AI Confidential. It goes into depth about how these tests are conducted. Joebot.xyz, also at JOEBOTXYZ on X.
Joe is one of the most important young men of his generation for this reason. I want everybody to immerse themselves in his writing. Joe Allen, thank you. Talk to you after the show. Short break. We're going to go look at some numbers now. I don't think these numbers will surprise the war room.
Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, Megan Messerly from Politico, the White House, one of the White House correspondents, joins us. Megan, this poll, walk us through it, because it's just not the absolute number in the poll; it's about the trend of the poll. This poll was taken, and a part of the highlight of this is President Trump's most ardent supporters, the MAGA base. And these numbers are pretty shocking. I mean, they would be pretty shocking to people that didn't listen to the War Room every day or weren't part of the cadre. Can you walk us through it?
Yeah, I think this comes as no surprise to anyone who is, part of the MAGA base and has been hearing these perpetual concerns about the war and having concerns themselves about the war and its costs. And what we really find here is that, as of May in our Politico poll, half of the MAGA base thought that the war was worth the economic cost. Obviously, folks very supportive of the president, inclined to trust him, receptive to the argument that this was about, stopping Iran from having nuclear weapons. Now we see, as we are, now entering the fifth month of war here, that only a little more than a third of the MAGA base still believes that the war is worth the economic cost here. So that's a 13-point dip. And at the same time, 37% self-identified MAGA Trump voters say the U.S. should only continue being in the war if it doesn't increase costs. And 1 in 5 MAGA voters believe the U.S. should actually just end the war in Iran regardless of the cost, right? So some pretty shocking numbers here to folks who haven't been watching this, but to your point, not surprising to folks who have been having these concerns themselves.
Because immediately people are going to say, hey, this is fake news. This is Politico. You got the axe out for the president anyway. Can you walk through the tabs? Is this a D+1? I mean, what is the crosstabs and the underpinnings of how you defined MAGA base? Because a lot of people are going to sit there and go, this is fake news. MAGA supports this 80%, which I can tell you just from doing this show is not correct. Because MAGA's got it's their kids in harm's way. And they want to see, particularly when you look around and you saw Johnson today or yesterday, communism is going to be their big selling point on the midterms. You've got the issue with AI we've seen overnight. These are all vital national security interests of the United States. A lot of people have questioned this Iran situation from the beginning. So how did you guys conduct the poll to push back on that? This is just more Politico fake news.
No, it's fair question to ask. I want to dive into the numbers and know the methodology. So how we determined MAGA voters. These are folks who both voted for the president in 2024 and then themselves self-identify as MAGA. And you can actually see the split in the poll results based on that self-identification with some of the non-MAGA folks, the folks who, maybe support the president, but not, as sort of loyal as the core MAGA base is. They're even a little bit more skeptical of this war than the core MAGA base is. So you can definitely see that there. We took this poll in July. The overall poll surveyed, more than 2,000 U.S. adults. The margin of error was 2.16 percentage points, plus or minus. So pretty good margin of error here. And, you can see in these results, I think the broader point is, this kind of tracks and has that sort of gut check with, a lot of what I've been hearing in my reporting, talking to folks in the MAGA movement, the things you've been talking about on the show as well. And I will note as well that the White House, when we went to them with this poll and said, is this concerning? Is this something the president is taking into account? The response was not that this is fake news. Their response was that, the president does not make national security decisions based on fluid opinion polls. And I know from my own reporting, talking to folks within the White House, they are aware that this is, that there is a perception problem with the war, that there are significant portions of the base who are concerned about this war, and this is the needle that they're just trying to thread.
Do you guys extrapolate from this in your coverage that one of the issues we keep talking about, and the reason we're taking the show on the road and going to different battleground states and having meetings with people like every day, particularly grassroots leaders, is about intensity. The Democrats are clearly are worked up. They hate President Trump. They hate the MAGA agenda. They're Trumpism. They're very worked up. And even their most more radical elements you get, the more worked up and intensity it is. Is this one of the reasons there may be this 10-point difference you see on some polls of the intensity of particularly people thinking about turnout this November, which is going to be absolutely key? Particularly, I say this is not a persuasion election. This is a turn out your base election. If you turn out your base, you're gonna hold serve, I think. But if you don't, you're going to have a big problem. Do you think this translates? This is the beginning, like the canary in the mine shaft about intensity?
Yeah, I mean, this is the concern that I, keep hearing from folks who are running these races across the country is that, to your point, this is a turnout election. They need that every single person who voted for the president in 2024 to turn out, or as many of them as possible. We know that's not how midterm elections work. They're always lower turnout elections. But there is this challenge. A lot of the core elements of the base, obviously still very loyal to the president, but really want to see fulfillment of the promises that the president made on the campaign trail. They're, frustrated that more is not being done on election security. We, heard the president's speech on that last week. He continues pushing for the Save America Act. They're frustrated that he's not doing more on immigration, right? And at the same time, this is sort of yet another blow. The president, has been very vocal about what he believes America First means and his opposition to these sort of forever wars in the Middle East. And that's what a lot of his supporters believe too. And so at the same time, I think a lot of those folks sort of understand the arguments the president has made for getting into this war, but they're grappling with high prices at the gas pumps. And they're feeling frustrated that they're just not seeing more of sort of these core tenets of the president's agenda being enacted. And they're seeing Senate Republicans and House Republicans oppose a lot of those priorities. And so that's just going to be a problem for, to your point, Republican enthusiasm heading into November.
Where do people go on your social media to get your reporting from the White House, and where they go get this article? We're going to push it out, but where do people go get your coverage? In particular, I want people to drill down on this poll today. We're going to spend more time on it tonight with some other views on this, ma'am.
Yeah. It is at Politico.com. You can find this. It's at the top of our site right now. And I am on X at Megan Messerly.
Megan, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Mike Davis, she talked right there about some of the core, like the immigration. And of course, the president's been fought both by guys on the Hill and in the courts, even allies on the Hill, but more importantly, these radicals in the courts. Talk to me about this decision. We finally got one that went our way. What happened?
Well, there's a couple big decisions. One out of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals and one out of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. In the Fifth Circuit, you have these illegal aliens or these non-citizens who have been in America for a long time. And Trump's Department of Homeland Security, Trump's ICE, is picking up these guys and detaining them as they should. And then you have these left-wing judges jumping in and throwing on their capes instead of robes, thinking they're superheroes instead of following the law. One of these narcissistic superheroes who thinks he wears a cape instead of a robe is this Judge Robert Pittman down in Austin, Texas. He's this left-wing radical Obama judge, and he held that these long-term non-residents get individualized hearings under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, meaning ICE can't detain them, or it's going to be very difficult for ICE to detain them. A 3-judge panel on the Fifth Circuit affirmed that. A Bush 43-week judge, an Obama judge, and then a Trump judge dissented, of course, because Trump's judges are generally rock solid. And the full Fifth Circuit, it's called en banc, meaning the full Fifth Circuit, just stayed that Fifth Circuit panel ruling and that left-wing judge in Austin and said, no, you can detain these immigrants. So that's key. That's going to be a key deterrent. If you are a non-citizen, if you should not be in this country, you should understand now the Trump Justice Department, Trump DHS, Trump ICE can hunt you down legally and throw you in detention, and you're going to sit in detention for a very long time while you try to adjudicate your BS claims. The alternative is to get the hell out of our country, and DHS makes it easy for you to do that. I think you can even get money to get the hell out of our country, but you need to get the hell out of our country. So that's number one. And the Fifth Circuit, the Second Circuit had a really good ruling where you had this Columbia student agitator who has been there for like 14 or 15 years, this total loser in Columbia who was agitating around campus. So DHS, the Secretary Marco Rubio essentially said this guy is a menace, a foreign menace. DHS detained him, and then some left-wing judge in Vermont let him out of detention. Well, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals just correctly reversed that and said that these U.S. District Court judges, these Article III judges, do not have the jurisdiction or power to do that. Congress has set up immigration judges, immigration courts through the Department of Justice, an executive branch function for these immigration courts, and you need to follow those immigration courts and not Democrat left-wing judges. So Vermont, Connecticut, and New York, under the Second Circuit ruling, can no longer free these illegal aliens, these agitators who we want the hell out of our country. So that's the message on both of these rulings. If you're an illegal alien, if you've been expelled from our country, you're not going to just walk around free like you did under Biden. Trump is going to put you in detention, and you're going to sit in detention for a very long time while you're trying to adjudicate your BS claim. So get the hell out of our country.
Let's talk about the adjudication. You go to detention, and clearly you're trying to make the argument to these people that, hey, if you leave, you get out of detention, because detention is not great, folks. But why do we still have this? Have we challenged, or where are we in challenges? Why do these non-citizens that have been here illegally, regardless how long they've been here, why do they get individual adjudication? Because if you do that, you and I talked about this years ago, it's going to take you forever to get these people out of the country. And all the left does is throw up roadblock after roadblock and habeas corpus hearings and all that. What is it going to take for us to push through that core issue to make sure that we can get them out of the country ASAP?
Well, we've largely done that. We're winning major wins at the Supreme Court and these lower federal courts, particularly these crucially important federal courts of appeals, the Second Circuit and the Fifth Circuit. are two of them where we just won. And that's the last stop for more than 99% of appeals, because the Supreme Court has discretionary review largely, and they only take about 100 appeals or less per year. So these are huge wins. This is the result of President Trump's transformation of the federal judiciary in his first term. You have these judges who actually follow the law on these critically important federal courts of appeals. Cheers to Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley for largely getting rid of the blue slip for these circuit judges, so Democrats can't block these circuit judges. This is how Trump was able to appoint a near record number of federal appellate judges in his first term, right? And so we're seeing the results of that now. He's continuing to appoint all-stars to the bench, like Emil Bovee, for example, on the Third Circuit. But that's why these judges are so important. And look, Congress has set up, under Article 1, Article 1 of the Constitution, Congress has the power to set the rules of the road for immigrants. And Congress has done this, right? They have very detailed laws, very detailed rules on how you come into this country, how you leave this country, how you apply, how you get kicked out. And the courts can't meddle in that. And the Supreme Court, the lower federal courts have made that clear.
Hang on one second. I just got a question on MAMDANI. I'm just holding you to a short commercial break. The Viceroy is with us. Back in a moment.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, since we're so slammed today, I got Natalie is coming on and John Solomon, Team Red. I got the Viceroy. So Viceroy, and finally, the warning has now been taken by the Hill newspaper has a great piece. Elizabeth's going to get it up for me, I think, in a while, about how Johnson and these guys are now shifted to, hey, they're really going to go all in on communism, right? And finally, after a couple of years of been preaching this, that they finally are aware. But I still don't think people are fully aware of the radicalness of MAMDANI. Now, look, I am the most anti-Netanyahu and anti-Netanyahu's administration and the Imperial Israel Project. I think it's for people that support Israel. It's destroyed so much of the consensus there. However, the ICC court has for years, we've never allowed these guys to oversee our troops or anything we do. We don't even look at it as legitimate. You got MAMDANI, who is worse than John C. Calhoun in nullifying federal law, right? Here, immigration law and just about everything. And yet he's sitting there saying, I'm going to arrest Netanyahu to get all his supporters all worked up. Now he's finally come to the conclusion he can't do that, but he puts out these messages. Mike, I don't think enough people are taking how serious MAMDANI is as a Marxist jihadist, sir.
Yeah, MAMDANI is talking about arresting a foreign leader coming to the United States based upon an international criminal court bogus warrant that the United States government does not recognize. That is extraordinarily dangerous rhetoric, and I think it's more than rhetoric by MAMDANI. I actually think he believes this. I think the Trump Justice Department needs to open a criminal probe on MAMDANI and his co-conspirators for violating the federal Logan Act, which is what Biden recommended that Obama used to open up the Russian collusion hoax on Trump. You cannot have, we don't have city-states in America, and we certainly don't have Muslim city-states. That would be an utter disaster, and that's what MAMDANI thinks he's creating in New York City. The president of the United States is the voice of the country when it comes to foreign affairs, when it comes to foreign relations, and we don't have several voices. We don't have a New York City mayor who thinks he can arrest a foreign leader coming to the United Nations, for example. That would be a federal crime. That would actually, it's much worse than people understand, because the Secret Service protects foreign leaders when they come to the United States. And so if you have MAMDANI sending the New York PD, the New York police, the good men and women of the New York police to go arrest a foreign leader, that is going to lead to a deadly standoff with the Secret Service. People are going to get killed if that happens, right? That is a seditious conspiracy. It's insurrection against federal authority. It is assault on federal law enforcement.
But right
felony
now, are
murder.
we
This is-
to your standard? Are we challenging this guy enough about the nullification of federal law on basic immigration? He's nullified everything. ICE can't even go into New York City. Forget mass deportations. We have a tough time even justifying going in and get the worst of the worst. But in the reconciliation bill, I think there's $1 billion going to New York City for, I think, redo a Penn Station or something that's quite worthy for the folks in Manhattan and New York and the tri-state area. However, as long as Mandami's running the deal, why are we giving New York anything? Why don't we choke it down economically, sir? I've been arguing about this in Tehran. Now we got to do it against the jihadist Marxists that are running Manhattan.
There's no question that Mandami is a dangerous Trojan horse communist Islamist in the United States. He's running the world's financial capital. He's running New York City, and this is a deliberate plan to destroy our financial capital, which destroys our country. They tried to do it 25 years ago with airplanes. Now they're doing it by importing Islamists and having them illegally vote in our elections. New York City voters did not put in Mandami. Americans did not elect this guy. It was illegals who voted to elect this guy because New York City made it legal for illegals to vote in their local elections. And the federal government, the Justice Department, needs to move aggressively against Mandami. This guy is not President Trump's buddy. They're not friends. I don't know why President Trump wants to give this guy $1 billion in New York City to prop up Penn Station or whatever the hell it is, because this guy is going to, Mandami is going to destroy our nation's financial capital, which is going to destroy our country, right? We cannot let this happen. This guy should face denaturalization proceedings for lying about being a communist when he applied for citizenship like 8 years ago or whatever the hell it was. They should look at criminal prosecutions for trying to conspiring to arrest a foreign leader illegally. He's constantly undermining immigration, as you said. This is a seditious conspiracy. This guy is an Islamist Confederate who's trying to destroy our nation's capital and thus destroy our country.
Mike Davis, where can people go? Article 3, your social media, all of it, Viceroy.
Article3project.org. Donate. Follow us on social media. The two key action items. Confirm Todd Blanche. He will be confirmed by August 6th, so long as the War Room Posse lights up both of your home state senators, Democrat and Republican. And then we also need to pass the Save America Act. We are finding in New Jersey thousands of illegals on the voter rolls, many of whom have voted, over 400 and counting who have voted. We have to pass the Save America Act. Cancel August recess. Recesses for kids.
Real quickly, Cornyn, President Trump's greatest allies, we were told by La Savita and these guys, they spent $150 million, is threatening to hold up Todd Blanche and all the ambassadors over AIDS funding for Africa. Am I correct on that, Mike?
Look, I worked with John Cornyn. I like him personally. He will come to his senses and he will vote to confirm President Trump's attorney general because Todd Blanche is clearly qualified.
If Article 3 does this job. Viceroy, thank you so much for taking time this morning. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Birch Gold, take your phone out, text Bannon, B-A-N-N-O-N at 989898. Ultimate guide for investing gold and precious metals, particularly 401ks, ROAs, how to roll them into physical gold and make it tax deferred. Philip Patrick and the team have all the answers. Talk to them. It's the quickest way to get access to them. No obligation, totally free. The #1 investigative reporter on the Chinese Communist Party is going to join us, Natalie Winters, to talk about this. Plus, John Solomon's going to be here on this. What actually happened in New Jersey. I think it all kind of ties together. The Marxists with America in its gun sights. Next in the War Room.